Our guest this evening, this is the first live UK event he has ever done. So we are privileged. We were the first, which is amazing. He served 20 years as a Navy SEAL officer, 20 years in the US Navy SEALs. He's collaborated with the likes of Simon Sinek, Andrew Huberman. He's a big deal in the US. He's the author of the book, The Attributes, which I've got to hear. 25 attributes for optimal performance based on Navy SEALs, but also in terms of any environment. He's also set up the organisation, The Attributes, and goes in now to companies like yours and organisations like yours and helps them understand what attributes the teams have and how they can leverage them for the greater good. I've spent approximately, over Teams, Zoom, and last night over dinner, I've spent about 2.5 hours with this individual, and I can tell you he is phenomenal. We are incredibly lucky to have him this evening. Hopefully, my part will do it justice. But please give it an amazing welcome to the incredible Rich Diviney.
Thank you. Yeah.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here. So before we get started, a little bit about myself. Yes, I was a Navy SEAL for just under 21 years. Obviously, the war started in 2001, so it was a very kinetic career that none of us anticipated. Started working in the leadership space, but really kind of delved into this performance space in 2021. I really started to dive into these attributes. What are the qualities that make up the highest performing teams? What are those things that cause teams to do what they do? Decided to write a book on these attributes because I realized that a lot of businesses and organizations were having some of the same problems that we were having, kind of defining performance. And how do we actually identify those qualities that actually define performance at very elemental levels? And so that's what we're going to talk about today, and looking forward to getting into it with you, and we'll have Q&A and everything. I was actually asked when I got out of the teams what the biggest adjustment I had was, and when as I thought about it, I said, it's probably the time thing, and the time thing. The reason why that is because there's actually 3 types of time. There's military time, there's civilian time, and there's Navy SEAL time. So military time is basically if you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. Civilian time is anywhere between start time and 15 minutes, you're fine. And then there's Navy SEAL time, which is plus or minus 30 seconds. And that's literally how we used to plan our helicopters. Like our helicopters would be like, hey, we will be there at 1:34 plus or minus 30 seconds. And so I recognize, as I got into the civilian world, that's somewhat unrealistic. But just know I'm kind of wired that way. So that's any of you who want to try out the plus or minus 30 seconds, clock, just feel free to do that. So
listen, yeah. we've absolutely nailed it today, haven't we? Plus or minus 30 seconds. I've been on them all day. It's been like a well-oiled machine. Yeah. What's amazing about Rich is I've met him twice, and he has been around 25 seconds early every single time. Yeah. Absolutely sticks. You know what I mean? The first one we've got, Rich, is self-efficacy.
Yeah.
A belief in one's ability to achieve a goal, especially when the path is uncertain or unknown. I'm going to make a statement at this point. I hope the team agrees. I scored myself high on this. Mm-hmm. If there's one of the 25 that I think I'm strong in, it's this one. Almost delusionally.
Yeah.
Is that a problem? Or
no, I mean obviously you've made a good go of it. Self-efficacy is in fact it's an interesting one because it's a combination of a few, again, kind of like perseverance. It's a combination of confidence, initiative, and optimism. And so self-efficacy is you have the confidence to know I can do this. You have the initiative to get started, and then you have the optimism or the realistic optimism that as you go through, you will figure it out along the way. And so now those other attributes, other than initiative, which is not really an attribute, but certainly confidence and optimism are in fact attributes, and they're part of the new list of 42 that we have going. But on their own, they can be fairly inert. In other words, just confidence on its own is not going to get you anywhere. I can be very confident I can do something. If I don't have the initiative to get started or the optimism, it's not going to work, right? I can have just initiative, and that's just like frenetic energy. Like I'm just going with no direction. I can have just optimism, which is great, but I can, that's me planting a garden and saying there will be no weeds, there will be no weeds. There's going to be weeds, right? So there's a combination in self-efficacy that allows us, which I imagine most of you in this room are fairly high on, that allows us to say, I know I can do this. I have the initiative to get started, and I have the realistic optimism that as I go, I'll figure it out along the way.
So it's got to be present in most what you would deem successful people, or certainly driven people.
Yeah.
That inner belief that I can do this. If you're slightly delusional like me, you watch Netflix programs around courtroom dramas, and you go with your Pringles and your glass of wine on a Friday night, and you go, I could do that.
Yeah. That's actually narcissism.
All right, okay, we'll come to that. We'll come to that. Remind me of that when we get back. Okay, so the second attribute on the drive is discipline. There is an old saying that discipline beats motivation any day of the week. Mm-hmm. However, you say the ability to remain focused and steadfast to achieve a result.
So discipline's a really interesting one because, that's the definition, but it actually breaks into a couple categories, and this is really important for us to dissect our own performance. There's what I call inner discipline and outer discipline, okay? Inner discipline, which we also labeled self-discipline, okay? But inner discipline involves the ability to pursue and achieve goals that we set that the outside world has no say in whether or not we accomplish, right? So that'd be like, I'm going to choose to eat healthy and get in shape, okay? I could make that decision. I could be in Las Vegas next week, and at the buffet is not going to throw pastries at me, okay? It's all on me, okay? Outer discipline have to do with those goals and accomplishments that we set that the external world has a say in whether or not we accomplish, right? That's becoming a Navy SEAL, starting a business, writing a book, becoming a singer. The outside world has a say. The outside world is going to throw things at you that you're going to have to navigate. And so discipline as an attribute, there's a constancy there's an understanding, okay, these are the wickets I have to do, and I'm disciplined in my achievement of that. But we have to be very aware of our levels of self-discipline, or inner discipline and outer discipline. So the way this manifests, I have known these types of people who are very high on inner discipline and low on outer discipline. These are, at least the folks I recognized were guys who everything about their life was organized. They were in super shape. They worked out at the same time. They ate the same thing all the time. Everything about their lives was completely structured and organized. They couldn't accomplish an external goal to save their lives, right? There's a reason for that, because if you're too high on self-discipline and too low on outer discipline, you are likely married to structure and routine. Routine is the key to self-discipline. So those of us who are low on self-discipline, routine is the key, right? But those people who are really high, when routine is broken, it's difficult for them to adjust, right? Then you have people who are high on outer discipline, low on inner discipline. That I would throw myself into that category. I'm very good at setting and achieving external audacious goals. When it comes to the self-discipline stuff, I always joke, I hate to be told what to do, even when I'm the one telling myself what to do, right? So the way I adjust that is I have to add routine and structure into but I'm really good in an unstructured environment. I'm actually most comfortable. But as soon as someone says, hey, do this, do this, do this, do this, I'm like, whoa, don't tell me what to do, right? Which is why the military actually helped with my self-discipline, because in some cases, at least in the early days, certainly SEAL training, like, hey, do this, and I was like, okay, well, I kind of have to, and so that's kind of the discipline as an attribute. So look at it in terms of, so as you answer, just think about your discipline and give yourself an answer overall. But I just ask you to start thinking about your own levels of self-discipline or inner discipline versus outer discipline, and if those are imbalanced in any way.
Awesome. Moving on, open-mindedness.
Yeah.
I did Richie's test online. I did them all before I came here. And I'm going to be open. This was the lowest score I received.
Interesting.
Open-mindedness.
Yeah.
A willingness to consider and accept new ideas, opinions, or perspectives.
Yeah.
Don't laugh. I scored low on this, Rich, and it made me flinch. I was like, I'm okay with new ideas and people's alternative opinions.
I know.
But am I?
Yeah.
It was like, I don't think I am.
Naturally. Well, so first of all, it's impossible to be high on all of these attributes. We're going to be low on some. It's really a matter of understanding where we sit. There's a open-mindedness. There's a passivity to open-mindedness. Okay, so how effectively are you able to just sit and passively be open to other perspectives? Right. This is different than curiosity, and I didn't put curiosity in the book, but curiosity is another attribute. Curiosity and open-mindedness are different. Right. Curiosity, there's a proactiveness to curiosity. So the example would be, we go to Thailand and we meet our local friend there, and our local friend says, hey, I'm going to take you to the most authentic Thai restaurant. And you and I are like, cool, let's do it, right? That's open-mindedness. Or we go to Thailand, we go to our local friend and we say, take us to the most authentic Thai restaurant. That's curiosity, right? So you may be high on curiosity and a little bit lower on open-mindedness, which could be dangerous, but we'll talk about that later. But really, it's just how willing are you to accept perspectives. Now, you are, I know because I know you now, you're high on adaptability. High adaptability actually helps with low open-mindedness, right? Because you are able to effectively shape and move in environments that are changing. So being high on open-mindedness and low on adaptability, you'll probably be okay, right? Because they actually buttress each other to a degree. So it's probably why you didn't really realize it, because you're probably high on one and low on the other.
Makes sense. I feel better now.
Yeah.
High on adaptability.
Yeah.
So this one is an interesting one, and I really want to drill it because it's something that comes with a negative connotation. You talk about it in the book as one of the things the Navy SEALs excelled in terms of an attribute, cunning. Cunning has a negative connotation. It's like sneaky.
Yeah.
It's insincere. However, what you say is, as an attribute, cunning is the ability to consider problems and circumstances from unusual and unorthodox perspectives in order to achieve a goal or objective.
Yeah.
You rate this as it can be a strength.
Well, so what I try to do with all this stuff is I try to take the judgment out. There's only one species on this planet that judges, and that's humans, right? No one else, no other species judges things bad or good. The whole bad or good concept is all a human creation. And so something like cunning, which is quite literally the ability to think outside the box, right? It can be used malevolently, right? In a bad way, it can be used benevolently, right? So Bernie Madoff was cunning in a bad way. Oskar Schindler was cunning in a good way, right? So cunning really, at its generic base level, is how am I thinking about a problem? The cunning mind approaches a problem. By the way, cunning always involves a problem, right? There's always something to solve. And a cunning mind approaches a problem and immediately asks three questions. The first question is, are there rules and boundaries? The second question is, are they real or are they perceived? And the third question is, if they are real, what happens if I break them? And the cunning mind begins to look at ways around outside the box. And it is a key attribute, especially in an environment where you need to think outside the box, which is most environments. I think, again, we'll talk a little bit about competitiveness. Typically, the competitive environments, cunning is a bad thing because it implies that you're not following rules, right? But in non-competitive environments, which actually business is not a win or lose thing. You don't win or lose in business, right? So cunning is actually going to be applied in a very good way. So it's really just a way we think about problems.
Just name them three principles again in terms of cunning.
Yeah. Approaching a problem. What are the rules and boundaries?
Yeah.
Are they real or are they perceived?
Yeah.
And if they are real, what happens if I break them?
We've got a lot of cunning people in this audience.
Yeah.
Pressure rooms today, they were the three questions most people are asking.
Yeah.
How can I break the rules?
Yeah.
How can I get this done faster? Just explain that to me again.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is that they're really fruitful for tackling problems.
Of course, yeah. They're totally thinking outside the box. Yeah.
From one to another, narcissism.
Yes.
I scored the lowest on open-mindedness and the highest on narcissism. So narcissism is the desire to stand out, to be noticed, or to be recognized.
Yes.
So narcissism generally, because we have co-occurring disorders and we have narcissistic personality disorder,
yes. Yeah.
we have the dark triad, we have psychopathy,
right.
We have Machiavellians, and we have narcissists. And if you score high, extreme on the scale, it's a very bad thing.
Yes.
But in a nice dose of narcissism, a moderate dose, it can be an advantage.
So the DSM-5, which is the psychological Bible, outlines narcissistic personality disorder. Whenever we hear narcissism, we think automatically narcissistic personality disorder. But narcissistic personality disorder only affects about 6% of the population. When you go to that DSM-5, because I bought a copy and I looked at it, and you go to that page, there's about 9 criteria that you look at, and the doctor is supposed to look at those 9 things and answer for the patient yes or no. And if I guess the rules are, if the doctor can answer yes to 5 or more of the 9, the patient is considered disordered, right? And so I got a copy of this, I started looking at the 9. And as I looked at the 9, I will say that I did not say yes to 5 or more, okay? However, when I was reading those criteria, I wasn't innocent of everything I was reading. So I was like, well, sometimes I think this, sometimes I feel this. So then I went to the basic definition of narcissism. Narcissism at its basic level is the desire to stand out, be recognized, be adored, right? Be made feel special, right? Every single human being on this planet at some point in our lives wants to stand out, be recognized, be adored, be made feel special. It's a very human thing. When we are infants and we are being adored by our parents, we are getting bursts of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Hugely powerful positive chemicals, right? It feels good. It also feels good when we're adults. And so narcissism metabolized correctly is often the impetus to some very audacious goals. When I looked at that DSM-5, I said to myself, okay, why did I become a Navy SEAL in the first place? And I thought back, and of course I was a patriot. I wanted to serve my country. But I was a 22-year-old kid, and when I was really honest with myself, I said, well, I kind of wanted to see if I could be a badass. That's why I wanted to try. And then I asked my buddies, why did they become Navy SEALs? And of course they said, yeah, I'm a patriot and all that stuff, but I also wanted to see if I could be a badass. There's a narcissistic thread there that causes us to want to be the best teacher, the best Navy SEAL, the best whatever, and it's not a bad thing. And so the key to narcissism is to metabolize it correctly, metabolize it effectively, and surround ourselves with people. The antidote to going too high is surrounding ourselves with people that tell us the truth and keep us humble, right? So you can spot the classic narcissists, the disordered narcissists, by who they surround themselves with. They're always surrounding themselves with sycophants who bend the knee, who tell them everything you want to hear. Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin. I mean, these are classic narcissists, right? And by the way, when someone leaves that group, because you can't bend the knee for forever, right? When someone leaves that group, that person becomes immediately enemy number one to that narcissist. That's what happens, right? So we can actually, by looking at the people we surround ourselves with, understand how to metabolize our narcissism in an effective way. Yes, you're high, but your wife probably keeps you pretty humble.
She does.
Yeah, as does your team.
And they too. In line with my opening statement this morning, I promise you it is not aligned, but it's just something that aligns. You say leadership is not a position, it's a behaviour, and you don't get to decide if you're doing it well. Mm-hmm. We started off with that mantra this morning.
Yeah.
Leadership attributes are incredibly important, but you will fundamentally be judged by others.
Yes. You can't we're not allowed to self-designate. In other words, we can't call ourselves a leader. That'd be like calling yourself good-looking or funny. Other people decide whether or not you are someone they want to follow, and it's based on how you behave. And these behaviors stem from these very basic attributes.
Number one, empathy.
Yeah.
The ability, whether deliberate or not, to join the emotional state of another person, to feel what someone else feels.
Yeah. Very important in leadership, because if you are able to do this, the person you're doing it for and with will immediately feel cared for. And the thing about empathy we have to understand is, first of all, it's not necessarily easy, and it does not require agreement. As leaders, it's really important that we make an effort to empathize, even if we don't agree, and this can be hard. I tend to try to look at people who have completely opposite views, because I've always been working on my empathy. I really have. My wife is extremely empathetic, and I've always tried to work on it. But I try to look at people who have the polar opposite views and really say to myself, okay, how might they feel this way, right? And I don't have to agree with it, but I try to make the effort. If you do that with it for another human being, they will feel cared for. It's really important.
It's an amazing quality in a leader.
Yeah.
Next one, selflessness. Placing the needs and well-being of others above one's own, despite a real or perceived risk. Does the perceived or real risk have to be involved to be selfless?
Yes. Yeah, so this is the difference between generosity and selflessness. Generosity also an attribute, but generosity it can be riskless, right? So this is any one of us walking along the street, we see a homeless person, and we give them $10, right? All of us were like, that's generous, but there's no risk. Now, where it becomes selfless is that homeless person takes that $10 and runs over to another homeless person and gives that homeless person $10, because that involves a risk. And so this is why selflessness, not generosity, is a leadership quality, okay? Generosity doesn't do it, right? Here's another example, okay? You have two friends, okay, and you're getting ready to move, and one friend says, hey, I will contribute $5,000 to your moving effort, and get the moving van, all that stuff. Great. And the other friend says, you know what, I'm going to come over on the day of you're going to move, I'll help you pack, I'll help you load the van, I'll drive to your new place, I'll help you unload and unpack, right? 6 months later, those both people ask you for a favor at the same time. Which one are you going to do the favor for? Not the person who gave the money. You're going to do the favor for the person who was selfless, gave up their time, gave up their effort. This is the risk, right? So risk doesn't have to be risking my life or anything that extreme. It can be, but even just giving your time. Time is a commodity that it evens us all out. All of us have the same amount. When we give it up, we can't get it back, right? So that type of a behavior is what's selfless, and it's a leadership behavior.
Moving on quickly, because I want to leave a lot of time at the end for Q&A and really get stuck into some stuff.
Yeah.
Authenticity. A lot of people talk about authentic leadership. Be yourself. You've got to be a believable, authentic leader. You say the degree to which a person's actions are consistent with his or her beliefs, values, and desires, despite external pressures.
Mm-hmm. This is really simple and straightforward. It's how you behave with everybody in your span of care. Authenticity is just consistency in how you behave across all spectrums with everybody.
Yeah, we have a person in the room today called Lee Radford who thrives on being authentically grumpy, and you've just met his experience, I think, because it's
nothing wrong with that.
Okay, next one, decisiveness, the ability to make decisions quickly and effectively.
Yeah. So decisiveness is an attribute. Making decisions is a skill. So in other words, you can teach people how to make better decisions. There's a process by which you can help people learn that. Decisiveness adds that speed and efficiency to the equation, right? And so decisiveness, what that is, it's an external expression. It's an external expression of compartmentalization. How effectively are you able to collate information, prioritize, and then act? Okay, and again, there's a balance there, but in general terms, those leaders who are indecisive or make long, protracted decisions that you're just like, okay, come on, do something. We generally don't look at that as effective leadership.
I talked this morning about a great leader of mine, Captain Richard Farrington in the Royal Navy, and he made some incredible decisions under pressure. And he always said, there's no such thing as a bad decision. You make a decision, and if it's the wrong one, you make another.
Yeah, which gets into the next attribute.
Awesome. It's like we're seeing each other up here, Rich.
Yeah.
Accountability.
Right.
Taking responsibility for and ownership of your decisions, actions, and the consequences thereof.
Right. Yeah. So this is owning it, right? So proper decisiveness needs to be buttressed by accountability. In other words, I am owning my actions. I'm owning my decisions, good or bad. And accountability works in a couple ways. First of all, it allows you to effectively adjust if the wrong decision is made or a bad decision. But the way I like to think about accountability is it also allows you to take control. Anytime we place blame on another, we cede control of that environment, that situation. As soon as you place blame on yourself, you immediately take control. You take control of the environment, you take control of the solution, right? So there were times where I would, as a leader, very deliberately take accountability for something that I had actually ostensibly no control over, but I knew by taking accountability and saying, hey, I own this, I could then take control and help fix it, right? So accountability comes in those forms, and typically that's what we see. And leaders who are accountable, who own that stuff, good and bad, are people we tend to follow.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Hope you're all still scoring this. All following it, yeah?
Okay. Everybody's 10 on everything, right?
Yeah. It's getting better as the night goes on.
Yeah.
So, teamability attributes. You say a high-performing team is defined less by how often it wins than by how often it loses or how well it loses.
Yeah, so teamability, and again, I stole that word from the SEALs. I don't know if it's a real word, just really defines how we operate in teams. It's just like leadership, we don't get to call ourselves great teammates. Our teammates decide whether or not we're great teammates, and they do so based on these key behaviors.
Number one, integrity. The ability to act in accordance with relevant moral values and social and cultural norms.
Yeah, so integrity, if we were boiled down, it's do the right thing. But here's the trick, and this is really important for all of us to understand, and you can read the chapter to get into depth. Integrity, do the right thing, is subjective to the group. So do the right thing for one group looks different than do the right thing for another group. So do the right thing for a Cub Scout troop looks different than do the right thing for an ISIS troop, okay? However, I will submit to you, if you have a Cub Scout who steals $5 from his fellow Cub Scout compared to an ISIS person who runs into a building and clacks himself off, who's acting with more integrity in that situation, right? By account of the group, that ISIS person is, right? So do the right thing must be clearly and specifically defined by any leader, any organization, any team, because if you don't define what do the right thing looks like, the team will just sort it out on their own, and you may not like the answers. So integrity is subjective. Sort it out. Make sure it's precisely defined, and then that's the standard by which people will judge do the right thing.
This one you say is essential for trust within teamability. Conscientiousness.
Yeah.
The ability and inner drive to work hard, to be diligent, and to be reliable.
Yeah.
And I think this is incredibly important. If you work with people, I'm going to name Lydia, who works at T2. If any of you you've met Lydia, she's incredibly conscientious.
Yeah.
I know that you give her something, she will work hard, she will be incredibly diligent, reliable, and it will be delivered exactly when it needs to be delivered.
Yeah.
And that fills me full of confidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that the
Yeah, and again, this is one that's a combination of a couple of different attributes. Diligence is an attribute. I don't know if reliability or work hard is. However, those things by themselves aren't necessarily good. They can be inert, right? You can be a very hard worker but not be reliable or diligent, and it doesn't mean anything. You can be very diligent but not be a hard worker or reliable, and it doesn't mean anything. So when you start combining these, that's what creates conscientiousness, and it's a really important factor. Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on. Here's an interesting one. Humility. Mm-hmm. Humility is incredibly important. The ability to be self-aware. We've worked on this all day. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And transparent about one's strengths and weaknesses. Rich, what we've done today is we've made people at times feel slightly uncomfortable through 360 feedback, through some testing, through some comments, some discovery, and then we've put them into some pressure situations where they have to look at themselves. I said this morning, self-awareness is not just the good, that's strength awareness.
Right.
Self-awareness is everything.
It has to be. And I would say in at least a certain context, Navy SEALs are some of the most humble and vulnerable people on the planet, and it's because we define humility, which is vulnerability, in a different way. It's being transparent about our strengths and our weaknesses. I need to show everything I'm strong at and everything I'm weak at. I need to wear it all on my sleeve. That's how you dynamically subordinate. You cannot dynamically subordinate with a team unless it's all out there, because you have to know when you're stepping up and when you're stepping back, and everybody else has to see that as well. So humility allows us to do that, and humility also allows us to kind of be a forever learner, right? Because we know even the masters, the people who are true masters, they do things better than anybody, but they're always like, well, I can still learn. They're humble about what they can still learn, which is interesting.
Is it not human nature, though, that admitting our vulnerabilities and weaknesses is so uncomfortable and alien? Is it not?
It is, but again, if you're in a circle of safety, in an environment of safety and trust, it's actually not uncomfortable at all. Those of us who have strong family groups, we do that all the time, and we don't think twice about it. Those of us who have strong business groups, in SEAL, we would make jokes all the time. I suck at that, but I'm good at this, right? And we make jokes about it. Self-deprecating humor can help with this too. Right? So it's all about the environment you create inside your team, and if you create an environment of humility and vulnerability, you will have that. It'll be very natural. But guess what? As leaders, we have to go first, right? If we're not going first, it's not going to happen. So we have to be the first ones to do it.
So I'll make an honest observation here. Everybody departed after day one. We've been planning this retreat for a while. I tried to do my team debrief at the end of the day. I choked up, I couldn't speak, and Tracy had to bail me out.
Yeah.
Is that humility?
Yeah, it's also being soft, but that's good. No, that's humility, because you obviously felt comfortable doing that. You felt comfortable doing that, which is great. We have humility in the sense of environmental humility, because if you turn your back on the ocean, it's going to kill you no matter how good you are. But we don't have that emotional humility. And I would say there's probably a reason for that. There's a guard we have to keep up. But I have coffee with my guys, the guys I served with are now retired, and we're all retired. And those of us who are still getting with each other and hanging and are healthy are now able to be vulnerable with each other in a way we never were. We're actually able to be emotional and talk about our emotions and our feelings in a way we never were. So it's really about the environment that's required for you. And I would say vulnerability in certain environments, it's somewhat of a dimmer switch, that you have to just adjust and modulate depending on what you need.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Humor. Let's talk about humor.
My favorite.
So humor is the ability to find the funny and laugh even when times are tough. Here in the UK, we have the Royal Marines, and they have their Royal Marines Charter. Mm-hmm. One of the 7 principles of being a Royal Marine is, it's humor in adversity.
I'm so glad that's actually on the charter. That's really good, because that's not even on the Navy SEAL charter.
When the bullets are flying, someone will say an inappropriate joke, and everybody just comes back down to earth. Yeah.
So, I have never experienced a high-performing team that does not have humor as an element, and there's a reason. So in SEAL training, in BUDS, one of the things they make you do out there in San Diego is something called surf torture. Surf torture is an evolution where you as a class, you basically all stand up at the edge of the surf zone and you link arms, and then when they say you all walk out into the surf zone until it's about knee high, and then you turn around and you lay down, right? So you lay back. So you're basically laying in there and the water's crashing over you and then receding and then crashing over you. You're in there for hours. It's one of the coldest things you'll ever do. A lot of people quit during surf torture, usually done at night. But at some point during surf torture, and they do it several times, but at some point especially during Hell Week, they will, during the evolution, an instructor will drive a van up onto the beach there, and they'll get out of that van with a megaphone and say, I have hot chocolate, blankets, and donuts for anybody who quits right now. And you get a lot of people quitting, And so I remember being in Hell Week and being surf tortured, and that, we were miserable, and that happened. The instructor, made that offer, and immediately the guy to my right, he yells back at the instructor and he says, hey, do you have any chocolate glazed donuts? Because if you don't, I'm not quitting. And he burst out laughing, and I burst out laughing. And I remember feeling like, okay, this is not too bad, right? But then I look at the guy on my left arm, and he's not laughing at all, right? He's lost in his pain. I don't even think he heard the joke, right? And I was like, I said to myself, this guy's probably not going to make it. And within about a minute, he quits, right? So there's an interesting thing that happens. When we laugh, which is an involuntary response, it's like sneezing, we immediately get juiced with 3 powerful neurotransmitters. The first is dopamine. We've all heard about dopamine. Huberman talks about dopamine. Dopamine used to be thought of as a reward chemical. It is in fact a motivation chemical. It tells us this is good, keep doing this. Hugely powerful, feels good, right? So we get dopamine. We get endorphins. Endorphins mask our pain, right? So in the late 60s, early 70s, neuroscientists were studying the brains of drug addicts, and while studying the human brain really, they said they found opiate receptors. They said, that's interesting. Why the heck does the human brain have opiate receptors? It's because we make our own opiates. They're called endorphins. This is the runner's high that we get when we work out. I mean, it causes us to be endurance creatures. It allows us to keep going the long haul. It floods our system. And then finally we get oxytocin, which is known as a love hormone, although it's not a hormone, it's a neuromodulator, which means it affects both the body and the brain, but it's basically the binding chemical. We get huge amounts of oxytocin when we engage in physical contact with other human beings, with our animals. We get it, acts of kindness and generosity, conducting those acts, whether you're the person doing it or the recipient, even witnessing acts of kindness and generosity induce oxytocin. So think about this, when we laugh, not even asking for it, right? Involuntarily we laugh, we get juiced with dopamine, endorphins, and oxytocin. I'm sitting there in the surf zone, I'm miserable. I get more miserable when the instructor makes his offer. My buddy cracks a joke. Suddenly my body says, this is good, keep doing this. This doesn't feel that bad. We're in this together, right? And so the highest performing teams, the thing I miss most about the SEAL teams, people ask me all the time, it's the humor. We laughed at everything. And I always say in the book, I say, honor your class clowns. Every team has a few class clowns. They're the people who make the jokes at seemingly the wrong time, but everybody laughs, right? And those people are priceless. Humor as an attribute doesn't mean you have to be the class clown. It just means you have to be able to laugh. And we've seen people that, boy, that guy or gal is not laughing enough. They're not going to make it. You need to be able to laugh. And sometimes the humor is, depending on the intensity of the environment, sometimes the humor can be quite dark. But it's still funny. A quick example, I was telling my buddy, one of my buddies this, for a fellow SEAL, former SEAL, and he was like, Rich, it's funny, we were on the way out of a mission in Iraq or Afghanistan, I can't remember where, but we were flying home from a mission, we just conducted one, and the helicopter we were in started crashing, started going down. And so we're all sitting there, and we're sitting there looking at each other, and one of the guys says, well, I guess we're not going to have to clean our weapons tonight. And we all burst out laughing. I was like, this is what I'm talking about, right? That he remembered, and of course the helo didn't crash, they recovered and got back, but this is the power of humor, so we have to have it. It's really essential.
We don't have to be serious all the time.
Yeah.
There's a price in humor, right?
Yeah.
There's a value in humor. You've all scored themselves low, moderate, or high. There is no good or bad, like you say.
Right.
It's spotting where you are. Where you're moderate, you're okay. Where you're high, leverage it. Where you're low, we need to put ourselves into environments where we can develop that attribute. That's the fundamental premise of what we're saying. Well,
I would say go ahead and take the assessments. The assessments, at least the ones online now, are for the grit, mental acuity, and drive. Where
can they find them, Rich?
So that's theattributes.com. You can find it there. So we have a 361 for leadership and teamability. We're in development of a full-blown individual assessment that's going to be a little bit in the future here. But take those assessments, get your scores, index that against your personal scores, and then use that as a start point for reflection and introspection. So in other words, if you find yourself low on adaptability, ask yourself, okay, wait a second. When I think about the last time I was in an environment that was changing around me without my control, how did I perform? And be honest with yourself, because you may have said, yeah, actually, I didn't like it very much. I don't like that type of thing, That starts to inform you. So it's really use this stuff as a snapshot and then introspect on some experiences that you've had to try to really, get a fundamental understanding of where you lie on this stuff.
Outstanding. Rich, I'm going to let you take a sip of your beer.
Oh, thank you.
Tracy, if... Sorry? Three more? What have we missed, Andrew?
Patience, competitiveness, and insouciance.
These are known as the others.
The others.
They were going to be drawn out in questions, Andrew, but seeing as though you've asked it...
That's the first question, yeah.
So the first question is, what are these other three, Rich? Let's go. Tracy, if you stand by on the microphone as well.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, we will answer that, Andrew, because that's a great question. But Rich has offered 20 minutes, half an hour.
Yeah,
We can ask him anything. Are the gloves off, Rich?
Gloves are off. Again, if I can't answer it, I just won't answer it.
Oh,
So
exactly.
You mentioned shake it off. What if the mental impact is deeper than how you show up?
We talk about resilience, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm getting there.
Okay. Okay.
Does this make my resilience level lower because I don't talk about it?
Resiliency is a muscle that can be practiced. And I will say that depending on the trauma, so in the book I talk about a 2-minute rule that one of our CEOs talked to us about, which is, he basically said, hey, 2-minute rule, his grandfather taught him. Something bad happens, take 2 minutes and just kick the dirt, swear, feel like crap, whatever. Do that for 2 minutes, and after 120 seconds, get back to work, right? Something great happens. Take 2 minutes, celebrate, rest on your laurels, do whatever, pat yourself on the back. After 2 minutes, get back to work, right?
What are the fundamental points that you reflect on as an individual, and then how's that impacted you as a professional?
I'm really intent on self-introspection and getting into my head. So in other words, and we can all see, I mean, the phones and stuff, I mean, people today, kids today, they're always on their phones, I'm always like, okay, I need to take time away from anything. No music, nothing. I'm in my head. And I think I always make deliberate time to be in my head so I can work out things, I can process things, I can think through ideas. Now, I grew up in an environment where we used to go on road trips, long road trips, and there were no Walkmans or iPods or something. So I'd stare out the window for 8 hours in my car, right? So in the back of the car. So I could still to this day sit in an airplane and just look out the window. In fact, it frustrates me with anybody closes the window shade. I'm like, look, the view, you're missing the whole point. But I think introspection, habits of introspection, and then I think one of the keys to success is the ability, we talked about this, the ability to delay gratification. In other words, you can say, hey, I don't need the result, that end state right now. I can actually delay that, and I can actually find reward in the struggle. I think that's something I consciously try to reflect on.
Navy SEAL, tough environment, high stakes, low information in some cases.
Yeah.
What process did you used to go through?
The first thing we have to do is figure out the environment, right? And so the question-making process, the habits we create, and this is all stuff I had to deconstruct. Humour and I put this together as we started to dig into this stuff, was what we realize we do is we are in an environment, we immediately say, okay, what about this environment do I understand? That list might be small, okay? And then the next question is, what can I focus on in this moment? You focus on it, you pick your horizon, you move, and then you come back out and you ask the question again. And as you do this process over and over again, you start, one of two things happens. Either you just keep on doing it and you suddenly step through the environment, you're done, and you can look back and then interrogate it. Or as you do it, your optic of the environment, your understanding of the environment begins to grow, right? And then the thing is, as usually in our environments, right, it's about growing your situation awareness as you're going through this process. There's going to be a certain point, there's a certain level of information, it's going to be up to you what that level is, your comfort level, that you say, okay, I have enough to make a decision. But the key is, I've actually been making decisions the whole time because I've been deciding what to focus on. Right, I'm going to move. Hey, do this first. Do that, and every time we do that, by the way, we create a dopamine reward in our neurology. So that dopamine reward gives us this feeling. Okay, this is good. Keep doing this. Allows us to do it again and again and again. So it's really about just starting to truncate the size of the decisions you're making, so that you can start figuring out the environment, so that you're just moving, and as you're moving, you're gaining awareness, and you're holding yourself accountable too, because you may make a movement and realize, oh, that wasn't a good movement. Let's make another decision. But that's all part of the process. So it's really doing it as rapidly as you can.
A question for me is, in terms of drivers of optimal performance in leadership,
yes,
how do you reconcile emotional intelligence in terms of the attributes?
Yeah, emotional intelligence is in fact another attribute that we talk about. I just didn't talk about it in terms of optimal performance, and we should probably define optimal performance real quick. But let me just talk about this, because emotional intelligence defined is the ability to manage our own emotions in the context of us being able to interrelate with other human beings, okay? Really powerful attribute, I think, necessary in leadership. The reason why I think I put empathy in the leadership is because empathy is a little bit more important just in terms of people knowing that you care about them. And this is where it gets really interesting, because when you start indexing these things together and you ask yourself, okay, can you be high on one or low on another, and you start comparing them, right? So someone who is high on empathy, like really high on empathy, but low on emotional intelligence, that's a person who typically is, they wear all of their emotions in their sleeves, right? They have a hard time controlling it. They're often exhausting to other people because like they're just, it's just everything, right? That's high empathy, low emotional intelligence, okay? High emotional intelligence, low empathy, that's dangerous, okay? Because what happens is if you're really high on emotional intelligence and really low on empathy, that means you know exactly how to manipulate people, control your emotions to manipulate others, and you don't care what they feel, right? And so obviously there's a balance there. We have to balance both of them, and being moderate on both, but understanding where we fall is important. But beware of very high emotional intelligence and low empathy, which some leaders have, right? So I think from a leadership perspective, empathy is more important, but certainly emotional intelligence helps. And then one thing I will do is I'll define optimal performance, because there's a reason. I was always, we always hear a lot about peak performance, and everything around it, is about peak this, peak that. Everyone wants to peak everywhere. And people used to tell me, you Navy SEALs, you're the ultimate peak performers. And I used to disagree with that, because I used to say, listen, we're not, because peak by definition is an apex. There's only one place you can go from an apex, and that's down, right? Peak also often, most of the time, has to be prepared for and planned for and scheduled. So the professional football player plans and schedules his or her entire week so they can peak for 3 hours on game day, right? That's what happens. We don't get to do that. SEALs don't get to do that. You all don't get to do that. So I said what we really are optimal performers. Optimal performance means I'm going to do the very best I can in the moment, whatever the best looks like in the moment. So sometimes our best could look like peak. It's flow states and everything's clicking and everything's awesome, right? Sometimes our best is I am just head down, nugging it out, because that's all I have right now. And it's dirty and it's ugly and it's gritty and it's hard. And that is still performing optimally. So optimal performance allows this umbrella underneath which peak lives and grinding it out lives, right? And it allows us to celebrate those times when we're actually grinding it out, because that is still optimal performance. And the final thing that optimal performance allows us to do, which is key for dynamic subordination, is it allows us to do what I call responsible energy management. In other words, I don't have to be peak when I'm driving to the grocery store. Okay, and a myth I'll bust about Navy SEALs, because you may have seen in the TV or movies, you might see a group of SEALs and they're getting ready to go on a mission, and right before they do, they get in a big huddle and they're like hoo-yahing and yelling and high-fiving like some athletic team getting ready to take sports, the field, right? That never happens, okay? It never happens. In fact, most of the time we'd be in helicopters flying into combat, and the guys around me would be napping. They'd be asleep, right? Because we don't know what's coming, right? We don't know what's going to be required for us. We're not going to waste an ounce of energy doing things we don't need to do. So optimal performance allows us to modulate this range of energy so that we can go the long game.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rich Diviney.
Thank you. Thank you.